Hello, and welcome to the Journey of Grief, Becoming Us Without Them. I'm Barbara Field. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I specialize in treating addiction and attachment and trauma and grief. And I created this YouTube channel so there would be just a big old pile of resources for people. I want you to hear people talking about their own experience of grief, hear grief experts, so you understand the many different ways that you can get help with your grief. And mostly just create a space where everyone gets it, that it's just okay to grieve exactly the way you're grieving. And that mostly we want you all to know it's never going to not hurt. And we don't want to set you up for that expectation. The burn can go away, but the ache will never ever go away. And so today I've invited Chelsea Rappel to talk to us about her work and as it relates to grief. And so Chelsea, take it away.
Thank you so much, Barbara. It's just really nice to be back with you. And this topic of grief is just so prevalent, so relevant, so dear. So thank you for your work. And I was really touched when you asked me to return and talk about how I specifically work with grief as a somatic experiencing practitioner and yoga therapist. And I've been thinking a little bit about this, even this query, as I recall it, that you asked me, Chelsea, I'd love to learn more about how you work with grief or how you work with your clients who experience grief or loss. And the first thing that really stood out to me was that word work, that how do we work with grief? And what came to me was so often, and I had this experience too myself in my recovery journey. I also work with addiction as well as grief, as well as trauma in general, and addiction recovery is part of my experience and my work. But I remember going into my first day of treatment and thinking, okay, how I'm ready to put in the work so I can move on with my life. So I can be done with this pain, I can be done with this distress, and I can move on. And it's so I have so much compassion for that tendency, that pattern. And it softened a lot over the years through this work. And so what I just want to reframe, I guess, as a starting point for us is grief, quote unquote, work as this thing. We're going to get in there, we're going to pull up our sleeves, we're going to use our tools, and we're going to sort of achieve some goal. I think work, at least in our society and our culture, is about getting a goal and meeting this expectation. And don't get me wrong, I love a goal. I love it. I love tools. And it in somatic experiencing, we're really working with the physiology. We're working with the nervous system. And so often in our culture, in our society, our nervous systems and our physiology are already in this work pattern, right? I see your expression of relating. There's this pattern of holding, whether it's like, I got to hold it together, or we're holding our breath, or we're holding ourselves really tightly. We're controlling and managing. And so the work really, when someone starts with me, is how do we kind of unwork? How do we actually learn to let that pattern down, even to recognize that pattern of I have to brace, I have to tense, I have to manage and control and get over this grief and get over this addiction, get over this really inconvenient thing and get on with what I'm really supposed to be doing. So, and I don't even think most folks, I certainly didn't realize how much I was holding and how much tension I was carrying, let alone all the grief and pain and suffering underneath of that. So, where I always start with folks is how do we create the conditions, the relative safety inside as a felt sense, so that my nervous system, so that pattern of bracing, holding, tensing, clenching can let down enough that I can be here with the grief, with whatever is here. And being here is where we have to start, in my experience. So I guess I'll just pause there, just with this reframe of work in general and the unwork that I'm inviting folks into, and see how that sounds for you as a general idea.
I totally agree with that. We're always looking for the fast forward button or the list. Give me the list, I'll check off all the stuff and how fast can I do it? But really, all therapy really is, rather than to hurry through something or get something, it's rather to stop and create space and see what happens next. But it's so counterintuitive, like we're just gonna create safety in your body and see what comes up. Well, no, I think we shouldn't we? And well, don't we need to talk about that? No, we just need to let your body talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that, the fast forward button. How do we- Yeah, and I think that pattern of, oh, what's next? And how do we, and what about over, I think that's part of the pattern. Like,
Mhm.
and you're right, what you said too, Barbara, about see what comes next. That's scary. That's like we're in the unknown. So I appreciate and have respect for that being potentially really scary. I mean, there's a reason we've been running and fast forwarding and bracing and managing, because what's under there, especially when we've lost something near and dear to us, is really uncomfortable. And so learning to find relative comfort, relative safety within the discomfort is, I think for me, a worthwhile goal. I think it makes us, I feel that maybe is my life work, how do I really find some ease, some softening, some letting down. And I really have been enjoying the work of Prentice Hempel, who says that embodiment is being aware of what is.
Oh, yeah.
Isn't that beautiful? So somatic experiencing and being in my body, it's like, I think we hear this is good for me. Being in my body is good for me, but we don't really know why. And why it's good for me is because I can be with what's here. And, you know, when I'm dealing with grief, when I'm holding space for my own grief, which there seems to be never-ending avenues for that today, or holding space for someone else's grief, I always like to think about one of my teachers, Lael Keen. She's a wonderful somatic educator and body worker. And she said something about grief that just touched me so deeply when we're really working with being with what is here. And she said that grief is not the process of losing what we had. Rather, it's the process of having what we lost.
Mm.
How about that? Never forgot it. And I'm not a person that always remembers things so quickly or holds on to things. But yeah, it's not about losing what I had, which I think makes sense. That can often be a fear. If I really let this grief flow and be felt, they'll really be gone. And what we're suggesting in somatic work and mindfulness work is actually it allows us to be in a relationship with what we lost. It's
Mhm.
going to look different now that that person or that being is not in body, but yeah, so I think we're really creating this opportunity for relationship, don't you think?
I completely agree. In my own experience, my husband died, it's been almost 10 years. And, at first it just like burned, everything burned. And then like the second year, you're more aware of what's gone, what's lost. And so it still feels like everything hurts. But eventually, when enough of that agony has been processed and cleared,
Yeah.
Then when you think about them, you remember them fondly. And when you remember them fondly, you get oxytocin, which accelerates releasing the stress hormones from your body. So the more I can just experience the fond memories as fond, it's like he's right there. And my
Yeah.
body remembers him. My body's like AI, so it remembers every moment of my time with him. And when I can invite that in and it gets past that wall of agony, then, the hugs and the conversations, you can get the richness back, you can get the depth,
Mm.
soothing. And so anything that enables us to let our body release that agony part of it so that we can get the yummy part back is a good
Yeah.
thing.
It is a good thing. I loved hearing that story, Barbara. Thank you for telling me that. Yeah, the process of moving, processing, clearing the agony so that you can have that richness of your connection with him and that can live in you. And what a resource, what a gift. I wouldn't want anyone to not have that.
Right. And it's still like when get to the depth of that connection, it's still an ache.
Yeah.
Oh, I know it's gone, but it doesn't feel like being blasted with a blowtorch.
Yeah. 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 And that reminds me of some of the research around, I think Brene Brown really led that research right around when we numb one emotion, we numb them all.
Mhm.
So the not wanting to feel the agony, I can appreciate that. That's torture. Who wants to feel that? That really requires a lot of capacity and courage, community, hopefully support. But if I don't allow that, in my experience, to really flow, to move through me, to be cleared, as long as that takes, I'm also numbing the joy. I'm numbing those beautiful moments I had with that person. And then I don't get any of that. And so I decided a long time ago when I realized I really need to get sober and start really being present for my life. That there was so much discomfort that needed to be felt, but it also allowed me that opportunity to feel aliveness again and to feel comfort and to feel peace and to feel celebration. And that full range of our vitality is what I want. And a lot of the people who work with me also want that. They just, we weren't taught.
Right.
We were taught push on, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, get it together, keep moving. So of course, we need guidance. I needed a lot of guidance on how to really befriend that full spectrum.
Because when I push away the pain and push away them because it's too hard to feel it in the
Yeah.
end, I don't just lose them, I lose me.
Yeah, right. What a great point. Yeah, we lose the connection with them, but also the connection to ourselves.
Yeah, and I'm still here.
You are. And look what you're doing. Look what you've created.
Yeah, it's
It's so
cool.
magnificent. It is really cool. And it reminds me of how this is both really yoga theory as well as somatic and nervous system theory, what we push away, what we avoid becomes really frozen, stuck, locked. We talk about we're not in fight and flight, we're in freeze. We're in just really overwhelmed, shut down. And what that will look like, I mean, that's okay for a temporary period of time. Our nervous system is designed to freeze when we're experiencing overwhelming or life-threatening experiences. So we want that capacity, but it's not meant to be a long-term solution because, as you know, and so many of your listeners probably know, what that does to our minds, our bodies, our psyches, is it really creates so much illness, physical illness, mental illness, emotional. It really increases so many of these management strategies, addictions of all kinds. And so, just like how when I'm walking around in nature and I see water that's become stagnant or frozen, I know in there's probably all sorts of bacteria and it kind of smells and it's funky and there's no real life moving in there versus when we see water that's flowing and moving and there's fish and there's plants and there's life that's within me. That's my nervous system also craves that flow and that aliveness.
What
um,
a great example. So explain more. So I come to you, someone says, you need to do somatic experiencing to help you work through your grief. So what can I expect when I show up my first meeting with you?
Great question. What you can expect is often we have some skills we need to learn. So, I spend a lot of time at the beginning really offering different tools to create a sense of, oh, my body is an okay place to be. So before we go digging around in the grief or the trauma, which is the next phase, I want to make sure your system knows how to find, as we were talking about, this felt sense of safety, relative safety, or resource. So, for example, Barbara, I might say, can you right now orient to the support that's holding your body right now? And anyone who's listening to this can do that too. Maybe we all take a moment to just notice, oh, there's a chair under me or a sofa or a floor. And under that floor is miles and miles and miles of living earth holding us. Can we orient towards that for a moment and notice any part of our body that starts to soften even just a little bit into that support? Or feel a sense of being grounded or held, whether that's through the feet, through the back, through the legs. It might be, is there some breath that wants to happen? Is there some little movement? We might notice an impulse to kind of roll the shoulders or wiggle the fingers and toes, a little bit of that. Just can I unwind 1% of that bracing, holding, tensing? So we're going to start to move you through a sequence of what we call new resourcing practices, stabilizing practices, and they're little mini bite-sized practices that my clients, myself, start to notice, oh, my feet really feel grounded right now. Or I just felt my upper back relax into the back of my chair, and that feels really nice. And then we build from there. So, what this does to give somatic experiencing a little more framework is it creates enough capacity in our nervous system where it knows, okay, we have a safe place to come back to. So, when we start to go into the grief, and you tell me a little more about your grief or your suffering, that it's not too overwhelming. So, somatic experiencing is not a cathartic model where you sit down in my office and I say, tell me about the grief. Let's go into the grief. Let's feel the grief. Let's expand the grief. Oftentimes, the system doesn't have the capacity for that. It likely will become overwhelmed and it might even shut down even more. So, what we're doing is we're creating this rhythm where, okay, I know where ground is, I know where support is, I know what's resourcing for me, and I know what that feels like. So that when we start to touch into the discomfort, the rhythm is that we can feel the discomfort, it can be expressed, it can be felt, and then we can come back to a resource where we can feel more aliveness and connection. And then we integrate that. And then we go back to the discomfort and then we come back to the resource. Peter Levine calls this pendulation. Pendulation is movement. Our nervous system is designed to move. But again, as we've been talking about, it's locked up, it's frozen, it's stuck. So I'm helping to facilitate these little pendulations, little movements, so we can start to relate to the grief or what was lost in a way that feels manageable, tolerable, so it can be cleared, so it can be released. And ideally at the other side, and I often see this, there's some meaning. You know, at the other side of that wave, there's, oh wow, I just remembered this amazing memory, or I just heard that person's voice, or I just remembered a teaching that they always used to share. And so often there's a natural resource that comes out of that. And that process can, be anywhere from 3 sessions to, a handful of sessions. We might work together for years. You know, um, we often find other griefs, it's never really just one. It's often all the seaweed comes up, but we work with one little bit at a time. So it's workable, it's manageable, and then it can be integrated into the whole. So I guess I'll pause there and see if that makes sense, if there's anything that came up for you hearing me say that.
It does, it absolutely does, because you can, you know, like just touch a little bit and then take a breath, and touch a little bit and take a breath. And gradually, as you build up some tolerance, you can touch that a little bit more and a little bit longer.
Yes.
And eventually you just can tolerate being in your body and noticing what it's doing. And if you need to access resources, your body remembers what those look like.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Yeah. Oh, so beautiful to hear it spoken back like that. Yeah.
It makes perfect sense, because when you're in grief, all you're focused on is the horribleness of it. And if we don't know how to, like, okay, can I also
Yes.
notice where I'm sitting? Can I just notice my feet on the floor? So you can go, oh look, I can do something besides this.
Besides the bracing, right? Yeah, that something else is possible. There's a different way I can relate to the grief. And what pops into my head is Francis Weller. I think I talked about him a lot on our last panel. He wrote The Wild Edge of Sorrow. He talks about creating a hospitable environment for the grief or for our pain. And other therapists and practitioners call it befriending the grief, or, reparenting the grief. But whatever we call it, whether we're calling it befriending it or making it feel welcome, or we call it finding inner safety, what we're doing is we're creating the conditions that grief has been missing, or that pain has been missing. So instead of meeting the pain with more tension, bracing, clenching, um, we start to move towards it as that really good parent, or that really wise friend who says, come here, like, let's just really hold it together, so we don't have to keep collapsing, keep falling apart. Um, I often find that deep, frozen, unlocked, unexpressed grief or trauma has been waiting sometimes a whole lifetime for a hospitable environment, an environment of curiosity and welcome and mutual support, so that it could talk to us, so that it could say, oh, I so need a good cry, or I so need to just take, rest here for a while. And so, that's what we're really creating. And that felt sense of I can become that safe space for my pain. I don't know who said this quote, but it's something to the effect of, I found the world to be quite devoid of safe places, so I decided to become one.
Oh,
Ain't that lovely? And so creating in our body not this environment of hostility and violence and avoidance, but like, hey, come sit with me. And then imagine where we could go from there. If everything is welcome and everything can be expressed and integrated and made to feel welcome. Imagine a world like that, where more people are doing that. I'm
yeah.
here for it.
So Peter Levine talks about, like, that, why zebras don't get ulcers. So
Mm,
when an animal is escaping, but then gets darted and just drops in the middle of that impulse to escape, when they wake up, they finish it. So they shake it out of their body and they run off. So when we experience something and we stop it and pull it down into our bodies, we're just like that zebra that's been darted. And these things that we've learned to create a space where your body can just finish what it was already doing,
Yeah.
to just let that impulse complete. So being able to say, okay, just listen to your body. Your body's just telling you stories you already know. So slowly creating a space where you can just let your body finish the stories it's just been trying to finish for a lifetime.
I love how you put that. Yeah, it's your body's been waiting so patiently to just complete what it was already inclined to do. I really love how you put that. And that can be so many things. You know, all of our emotions are really just pointing to that need for expression, whether it's, oh, I really need to cry. But again, you've been crying already today. Yeah, I need to cry again. I need to keep crying. I need to keep crying until I'm done crying. Or maybe it's, I need to stomp my feet. Or I need to be able to push and create space for myself and set up a boundary. Or I need to reach out for a hug. My hands have been clenched in fist, but they've really been longing to reach out for a hand or reach out for support or reach out in celebration.
Yeah,
So we talk about trauma being stored in the body. That's not exactly the whole picture. It's really, yeah, it's these unexpressed impulses. And I love how you put that. They've just been waiting. They're ready to complete what they've already been set out to do. Yeah.
yeah. And so those of us who do the somatic work, we try to just create welcome in the body
Yeah.
and safety so that it can say, oh, well, while we're here.
Yeah. 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 While we're here, I've been meaning to tell you how sad I am. I've been meaning to express how frustrated I've been. And we build the capacity to complete those impulses
Mhm.
so we can feel, all of that pushing and clenching and forcing. That takes a lot of energy. That's a lot of life force energy and vitality that we're using to unlive, like using to push away, using to avoid, whether we're doing it with food or doing it with overworking or doing it with other substances, which I'm familiar with all of those things and have personal experience. All of that life force energy could be directed when we know how to direct it and work with it skillfully. We get access to that life force. We get access to more aliveness. And I want myself and the people I work with to feel more alive. That's what I think this world is really longing for and really in need of. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's wonderful. I'm so excited to know that you're out there working with people and helping them create space for all the parts. And so I always end my videos asking for your 1 minute wisdom. So given that people may or may not actually watch this video or all of this video, if you had just 1 minute to leave people with, this is the thing I really want you to know as you begin your journey of grief. So what is your 1 minute wisdom?
Hmm. Taking that one in, I guess I'll go back to the beginning of really beginning to create that relationship and connection with yourself as a really wise container
Mm,
for the grief that you're holding, that you're carrying for your beloved dead, that relationship is alive within, and start to really track and pay attention to where am I holding? Where am I in that bracing pattern, whether I'm holding my breath or holding my shoulders up by my ears or clenching my jaw. Every time we bring awareness to that pattern of pushing, working, forcing, controlling, managing, we bring awareness to it and we let it soften, even just 1%. I'm talking really, start with 1%. 2%, let it down for 30 seconds, twice a day. We're creating those inner conditions for an inhabitable environment, a hospitable, relatively safe environment, so that what is stuck in me can start to flow, can start to move, and can start to contribute to my aliveness. So that what needs to be cried, what needs to be grieved, what needs to be expressed and created has those conditions. So my encouragement is to really start to pay attention to where am I holding? Where am I holding myself tight and in control? And for 30 seconds, can I start to soften that and build from there, and eventually until we can tolerate and have the capacity for any kind of discomfort and build a world community where we're all supporting each other, where it's safe to let down and to be held together. And so, yeah, and also I love you. There's so much love and compassion for you, and you're not alone.
Yeah, that's the good thing to know, is that people get you and care about you, and you're not alone.
Yeah, that's all I really ever wanted to hear. Yeah, yeah,
Absolutely. That's what your nervous system wants to hear.
that's right. Waiting so long. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you. It's been wonderful spending more time with you and hearing about your work and your deep compassion for the people that you work with, and how your story has become your wisdom for people.
Thank you,
And
Barbara.
I will turn off the recording, and hopefully I will see you again soon.
Yes. See you again soon.